What's up? Welcome back to Barton and Bud. I'm Barton Simmons. That's Bud Elliott. We are here on a Sunday night talking about week 2 of SEC ball, week 5 of FBS ball, and this season is going to be so much fun because we are conference only all year long, and week 2 of SEC was awesome. There was upsets all over the place, Bud. We got a lot to get to. How are you doing on this Sunday night?
I'm doing well, man. My bets are not second straight week. I lost a first half team total under because the team gave up a safety.
You were on that? Oh, man.
I had Tulsa under 10.5 first half. Okay, they're not moving the ball at all. UCF runs 4 yards back into their end zone. Safety. They have 12 points at the half. And last week, I had Vandy under 3.5 first half points, and the score is 7-5 after A&M drops a punt in its own end zone. So
I thought you were alluding to being on the TCU Texas under that hit with the intentional safety in the game that, as it turns out, shouldn't have been allowed. In fact,
that's definitely a bad beat. I did hear you killed it over the weekend though, so that's.
I am seeing the ball right now. I will see if this is see if I can keep it rolling. I was 7-1 on the Cover 3 Locks pod. On my personal bets, I was 9-2. So let's this is we'll see. We'll see if it's early season luck or whether I keep this train rolling.
You guys are getting intel from somebody who is really dialed in and somebody who is not.
So you've been on the closing line value train, right? Like that's like your thing. Like this is my new. This is not something I've ever really been paid attention to. But this year it seems like that's the new hotness in gambling, is like the smart people are jumping on this. Like you got to get the closing line value. Is that kind of your approach right now?
That's really always how I've graded it, because if you assume like college football is a fairly efficient market, right? Like it's not quite as good as the NFL, but there's a lot of money that goes into this market. But by the time the game kicks off, every big betting group and syndicate out there has had a chance to weigh in, and they've had a chance to pop these things on some of these sites that'll take 20 G's or 50 G's in the game. Like that number is usually fairly solid by the time the game kicks off. If you're getting a bet that is better than what you get at kickoff, right? That means that you achieved value relative to an efficient market. That's like if you're winning a bunch of games and you don't beat the closing line, you're either very lucky or you have insider info that these big groups are not privy to. Most likely. It's possible, and it's not like, hey, you have to beat the closing line on every one. That's not going to happen. I'm trying to hit 75, 80% of my bets beating the closing line. Sometimes that happens. Some years it doesn't. I really want to avoid the ones where it goes against me, right? Because that means I'm misreading the market. And I think I've only had a couple of those this year. But yeah, that's what I always use. I'll take a screenshot, or a scrape of the odds screen at kickoff, and I'll just go back and compare. So, okay, which ones did I beat? Which ones did I not beat? How much did I beat them by? And then I'll group them into some buckets. Full game, first half type thing. Totals, sides are different, obviously, because a point on a side is different than a point on a total as far as the amount of value. I don't know, man. Like I think I went 2-6 in the ones that I beat by a full point this weekend. So that was fantastic.
So the closing line, so like that's the where the line is moving, is like those haven't been winners. Like that's surprising to me.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, like for instance, North Carolina. I grabbed 10 when it opened. They closed 13.5, 14.
Yeah,
lost.
That was one of my 2 losses on the weekend. So I'm with you on that one.
They just got I know this is going to be mostly an SEC show because we correctly predicted that the Big 12 champ would have a whole bunch of losses. And we'll talk SEC tonight. But that Carolina game, I just did the breakdown for the Every Game Reviewed, series that I do, and that's a weird box score, man. Like
it was a weird game. I watched it off and on.
I just feel like every time Carolina had a good drive, they started at their own 6-yard line. So they're getting all these yards, but they were just starting from so far deep. And then when they actually got good field position, they didn't do very much with it. So
Yeah,
it's
that's interesting.
kind of wonky.
I feel like Jeff Hafley's a good coach.
Yeah.
I'm not sure Boston College is a good team yet, but I think Jeff Hafley's a good coach. I mean, have they even had a game? Has Boston College even had a game where they've averaged more than 3 yards per carry? Like they're just grinding it into the ground and not moving the ball at all. But somehow Phil Dracovic is found himself as a deep ball passer, and they get some big plays here and there, and they're opportunistic, and they just sort of hang around, man, which is I think probably an indicator of a pretty well coached team.
Like they're finding ways to win. I feel like he threw 56 times, I think it was this week.
That's incredible.
In no scenario would I think that Phil Dracovic throwing 56 times would be a recipe for them to stay in the ballgame at all. And they did.
Yeah. Well, so here's I pitched for the listeners out there. I pitched Bud on this tonight as a way to dig into the games this weekend. Sort of a buy, because the SEC is 2 games deep in the season. We might think we know who these teams are 2 weeks in. Reality is we probably don't in a lot of cases, but there is a perception of each team at this point. There's like a market value. And so kind of an old go-to game to play and is the buy or sell game. You know, are you buying this stock and we're going to sort of set the price on it? Are you buying the stock or are you selling the stock right now with all these SEC teams following this weekend? Because I really think that just like last weekend, like everyone, like Mississippi State, that stock would have been gobbled up last weekend, right? Like everyone was just jumping on the hot stock. And then 1 week later, they're losing to Arkansas, a team that hadn't won an SEC game in 20 tries. So, you know, Vanderbilt, they play at Texas A&M close, and then they get beat by 40 to Vanderbilt. Like, I just think you know, but you probably don't. And so I think it'll be fun to use these games as a backdrop to sort of where our confidence level is and where our expectations lie moving forward for some of these SEC teams that are really just getting going.
Let's start at the top, man. Bama, I don't know, like 50-something points, A&M 24. Let's go buy or sell. Alabama is the best team in the country.
Right. So obviously you're setting a pretty high price here. But I'm actually buying this ticket. Like I think that I think first of all, Texas A&M probably isn't a great barometer. Texas A&M appears to be a far cry from what the best case hope was for this year's team. Because it's not just the Bama beatdown, but Vanderbilt game looked like crap too. And they're just, you know, how can we have too high of expectations for Texas A&M? But that said, when Alabama's top guys are in, they've been totally dominant. I think their defense with guys like Will Anderson, the true freshman edge rusher, and the return of Dylan Moses and Malachi Moore, a true freshman that's impacting at the star position, and all these other not young, but guys that have been sort of backups in the secondary emerging right now. There's deep on the defensive line. I think Alabama's defense is better than it's been in, I don't know, I'd say at least like maybe 3 years. I'm not remembering a specific defense. I'm just thinking back to like last couple of years it hadn't felt the same. I think this year is closer to the same old Bama on defense, and I do think it is still the same Bama on offense. And I also think in a year of uncertainty and distractions and just silliness, it's a good year to be just a fully operational Death Star with a bunch of stormtroopers that you can send out. Like Bama is just they are built different. Like they're programmed different. And I think Nick Saban is a coach to trust in a season like this. So Yes, I think I put them in my CBS poll I fill out every week. I bump Bama up to number one. I think they've been just a tad more impressive than Clemson, and I have a little bit more confidence in them than Clemson. And we've yet to see Ohio State, but I think Alabama is. I think you can make a really strong case that they are the team to beat.
I'm right there with you. This is a high bar. There's no doubt that Bama has been the most impressive team through two games. I do think that they're the best team in the country, and I say that without having seen Ohio State, obviously. But like Barton, they've already answered some of the questions that we had coming into the season, like you said, with Anderson and with Malachi Moore. I'm a little bit hesitant, like you are, to just shower them with a ton of praise because Jimbo runs an offense that Nick Saban loves to play, right? It's at its core, it's kind of a pro style offense. It's not one of these kind of schoolyard football. Who is the guy at Ole Miss?
Chad Kelly.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Like we're not Bo Wallace in this thing up. It's pretty much within structure, and Nick Saban's defenses love to play offenses like that. And we also knew that, look, Bama, if you're going to beat them, you have to be able to throw the ball outside receivers and win one-on-one battles. And I was kind of like, all right, we're good here after the first drive because A&M had two shots at one-on-one guys, and they were fairly well covered, but the ball placement on at least one of those was decent. Receiver didn't come down with it, and I was like, all right, they're not losing this. And then the pass protection. There are some questions to me about Alabama's run game. But, dude, the pass protection, like Mac Jones was rarely touched, and that's a fairly talented A&M defensive line, right? I mean, they got some havoc plays against Vanderbilt. I expect they'll be one of the better defensive lines that Alabama faces this year in the league. And Mac Jones had all day. I mean, this is just straight Phil Mickelson hit bombs. They were just bombing it on him. And yeah, it's A&M, and they're not as good as in the offseason we thought they were going to be. But, dude, beating them by 31, like they treated A&M like Texas treated UTEP. You know, like this is kind of next level stuff here. The emergence of John Mechie was pretty awesome there. We'll see what the run game does. They're actually fairly decent in the 4-minute when they started handing the ball off to Robinson, and he was able to run and kind of grind away some clock. But they look the best so far. They're comparing them to Clemson, they're just more explosive than Clemson. They have shown the ability to get to another gear that so far Clemson has not really shown yet this year.
It feels like the game, like we've been so programmed for so long to say, man, well, who wins in the trenches? Like, who's got the defensive line or who's got the offensive line? And that's like, I'm not saying that that's not still important, especially the defensive line side of it. But does it feel like to you, maybe you may have like the freaking like statistical formula to back this up, I don't know, but like, does it feel like it to you that this game now is much more about like who has the dudes on, who has the receivers? Like for it feels like we're very much in an era where it's like, what are your receivers like? Can your receivers beat their receivers? Like when I think about Clemson beating, Notre Dame a few years ago and just sort of smacking them, like the main difference there was the perimeter. Alabama right now, I think the main difference for me between Alabama and Clemson is I kind of trust Alabama's perimeter guys a little bit better than Clemson's. Ohio State like consistently built around these really strong wide receiver groups. LSU last year, I mean, talk about a great example. Like those guys are like those guys combined with Joe Burrow's courage and throwing them the football and just allowing them to go make plays. Like that's what made LSU impossible to stop because those guys could be covered and they go make a play. So are you with me on that? Like, are you sensing that same sort of trend where it's just the old, like, what do you got in the box kind of talking point is giving way to what can you do in the one-on-one matchups outside, not just to be Bama, but period?
I do agree to an extent. Like there's a certain minimum threshold that I think you need to hit up front on both sides of the ball in order for
Sure.
that to become relevant, right? But then after that, yeah, I start to look outside and I start to look at the space game. I mean, think about like the last four national champs. I'm going to cut it off here at four because like 2014 Ohio State, we talked on the last podcast, just they had absolute studs on the outside, but they really were not an incredible deep ball throwing team. That 2015 Bama team that won, with Jay Coker, kind of the same. That was not a team that I identify as a team that was, bombing it deep. But like since then, man, 2016 Clemson, NFL studs at receiver, bombing it deep, like consistently attacking you deep. 2017 Bama, once Tua got in, yeah, I mean they were,
Yeah, that was the difference.
they were chucking it.
Yeah.
Hell, look at the play to win the national title game, right? 2018 Clemson, that's the team you decided against Notre Dame. And then last year, 2017 LSU, they would chuck it deep occasionally. And the thing here is, it's like the evolution. At first, the spread was using the field horizontally and spacing everybody out that way. Now it's the best teams in college football are able to consistently go deep and connect. Like they're throwing deep, they're throwing the ball a long way in the air, and they're connecting on them at a high, like a much higher rate than they used to. And man, this Bama team is so scary in part because that pass protection really is really good. I mean, they have the time to push the ball down the field and to wait. Like some of these, like a lot of those, the routes that Mac Jones hit were double moves, and he just sat back there like, okay, DeMarvin Leal, whatever, not a threat here. Just okay. Oh, hey, Waddle's finally open. Over the top. Yeah, they're scary good. How about on the other side though? I'm going to throw one at you here. Texas A&M, buy or sell. We've already established that in Bama's class, but they can still go 7-3 and finish second in the West.
That was so you set this price, and it's a high price for my taste. Now I know that they have just they just didn't have a great showing against Vandy, and they just played the best team perhaps in the country. So it might be a bad time to cast judgment on Texas A&M. But I don't know, man. I don't like what's the thing you trust here? Because the thing you don't trust Kellen Mond. Kellen Mond can flash you big plays, but you don't trust him. You don't trust the receivers. Aeneas Smith is their best player on offense, but he, even he like made some big plays, but he also had some drops. I don't trust their offense to you've been critical of Jimbo Fisher, rightly so, in the way he constructs that offense. I don't trust that offense. The defense, the secondary got absolutely torched against Alabama. I'm not saying they're not a good team, but I don't, considering who this team is, like this is a Texas A&M team that's consistently let us down in that quest to cycle up. I didn't see anything on Saturday, and I didn't see anything last Saturday that leads me to believe that this team finishes second in the West. I think this feels 6-4-ish. So it's like I could see like 7-3 is possible. Like I'm not dismissing that, but it feels more 6-4-ish than 7-3.
I think we're right there. I'm gonna sell too. Just I feel like this is a bit on the high side, but like somebody has to finish second in the West. I have a hard time thinking that 6-4 gets you second place in the West. I mean, somebody's going to stumble into 7-3, and all of the SEC West contenders aside from Alabama have had a legitimately crappy game to this point. I mean, LSU looked terrible against Mississippi State. Auburn over the weekend, which we'll talk about in a little bit. A&M, got their butts handed to them. I think A&M is actually the most excusable blowout loss, right? And LSU didn't get blown out, but like yards wise, they definitely did, and it was also at home, and it was to the weakest of the teams that like LSU, Auburn, A&M have played so far. But like my main hangup here is that A&M normally plays so slow that it just creates unnecessary close games. right? They don't play at enough tempo to actually get enough possessions to put some of these teams away. So I could see them, only being up a touchdown late against an Ole Miss or Mississippi State or Arkansas. So for that reason, I'll go ahead and sell as well. By the way, 5.4 yards per target to A&M's outside receivers against Bama.
It's not good.
That's what I mean. That was like we highlighted that in like the deep dive preview we did. Like they had to make some plays, and I thought they were actually fairly creative with all the different ways they got the ball to Smith and Weidermeyer.
Yeah,
but that was also sort of like that they told Gary Danielson in the production meeting, and he said this on the broadcast, that they were going to try to get 10 touches to Weidermeyer and 25 touches to Aeneas Smith. That's sort of like a tacit admission that you don't have the dudes on the outside to make a difference. And they didn't get their most talented, athletic young guys involved. I don't think Devon Demas played.
I would say Jamon Osborne is an above average SEC receiver, SEC starting receiver.
Yeah.
But he has his decision to opt out has an outsized impact relative to his skill level. Like they just needed him. They needed that threat. They needed that consistency. They needed that sort of a playmaker. All right, next game's an interesting one. So Arkansas beats Mississippi State 21-14. Mississippi State is the toast of college football. Mike Leach is going to take over the SEC, the air raid. We're having our entire editorial meeting is talking about how we're going to cover this Mike Leach takeover, and it's and for good reason. Like this is going to be a blast. And like, it's not 7 days later, and we're in the Mike Leach experience of big time win, disappointing loss, puts up 40, puts up 14. So we'll start with Arkansas, because Arkansas is the one that broke the 20-game SEC losing streak. Arkansas is the one that comes off a win, or a closer than expected game in week 1 against Georgia, and then they go and beat Mississippi State. The price here is Arkansas will get 2 more SEC wins this year. You buying or selling?
I think I'm gonna buy, man. And look, Arkansas, they weren't even necessarily the better team in this game. If Mississippi State can hold on to the ball, they probably win. I don't want to oversell Arkansas here, but they do get Missouri. There's a chance they could, get somebody else. I want to give Arkansas some credit and also criticize LSU at the same time.
Yeah,
I was doing the Every Game Reviewed column, and I had to take and slide my browser window over to my other monitor over here, which is in portrait mode, kind of up and down, in order to take a screenshot of all the explosive plays that LSU allowed, because I couldn't zoom out far enough and still read the text if I had it in my landscape, like the side-to-side monitor. LSU allowed 15 passes of 20-plus to Mississippi State. Arkansas allowed 1. Like, that's just called, all right, we're going to just be humble. We're going to swallow our pride. We're going to drop 8 guys. We're going to say you can't be, like, we're going to be patient here. And it's not like that always works against the air raid, but against an air raid team that's only practiced together for 6-8 weeks, that's not a bad. And to get, like, most of these guys have never played in the air raid, that's not actually that bad of a strategy. And Arkansas with Barry Odom, who was the head coach at Missouri, who, by the way, employed Josh Heupel, who runs the Baylor system, which is an offshoot of the air raid, right, under Art Briles. Like, I'm sure that Barry Odom, when he had Heupel as his OC, understood a little bit of stuff that actually bothered, that bothered these type of offenses. And losing, Kylan Hill early in the game obviously hurts Mississippi State, because maybe they can hand them the ball and make them pay for dropping all those guys into coverage. But Arkansas they look well coached to me, and they're just finding ways to win, kind of in that Jeff Hapley way. I definitely don't think they're good, but I'm going to buy. I think that they're going to get to 3 SEC wins, dude.
I'm going to buy 2. This is
Wow.
probably
We got 2 buys.
I know this is probably a a little bit like of like the remnant confidence I had in this team coming into the season. I remember Trey Biddy, our Arkansas publisher at 24/7 Sports. They're doing an awesome job with their site. Check it out, Hogs 247. And I remember asking him, like, I can't remember when we were talking or when, but I was like, you know what, like, am I crazy for thinking that this team might be pretty good? And I can't even remember what he said, but it was something to the effect of, yeah, like maybe we'll see. I mean, I think there was definitely a sort of a subtle, just sort of defeated mentality of, man, I don't know. We've been pretty bad for a while. It might be who knows. I'm not making any predictions. But like they have some pretty good players, and belief is a powerful thing. And I think what we've seen in the early going with Arkansas is belief. We saw it against Georgia. We saw it against Mississippi State. We saw trust in that staff. And we saw a staff that was willing to do what it had to do to win that game, and they did. And so I don't know where the other wins are going to come from, but I think in these two games, with like for them to have jumped out to a positive start like this early, I think that's going to build on itself, and I think Arkansas is going to continue to be a tough out. And I think like this is a team. I remember last week I was talking about NC State before this upset over Pitt, and I was like, maybe it was even 2 weeks ago. I was like, you know what? Like they look good against Wake. They're going to get blown out by someone. They're going to lose like 45-3 to someone, and then the next week Virginia Tech blows them out. And then this week they surprise us all and they beat Pitt. I don't even really get the sense that Arkansas is that team that's going to like they'll get blown out maybe by Bama or somebody, but I don't get the sense Arkansas is going to be a team that I think they're going to be. They feel like to me a type of team is going to be competitive every week, and they're going to scrape and claw and scrap every week for a win, and I like a team like that. Mississippi State, the price will finish sub 500 after dominating LSU. So this is sort of a more it's a reasonable price here, I think, because if you'd set this last week, people would have called you crazy. But we'll finish sub 500 after dominating LSU. I'm curious what you think people would have predicted Mississippi State to finish if Arkansas was their first game and they lost it. Like people would be sitting here talking about, can they win a game, right?
Right. So last week in one of my columns, I said I think Mississippi State has a good chance to finish 500 now, 5-5. And the response I got from Mississippi State board was,
yeah.
I was a non-believer.
I can imagine.
And they're like, look, we have 4 more guaranteed wins, and you know which one of those guaranteed wins, of course,
right,
was Arkansas in Stark Vegas. But man, yeah, if they had lost to Arkansas to open the year, I think people are probably talking about them like 2-8. So maybe 1-9. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and buy this. I think Mississippi State's going to finish, 4-6, probably the most likely. I think not every team.
So you're buying that. You're not saying by buying this ticket, you're not saying like you think they will exceed that. You're saying that you think that they're going to be like a 4-win team.
Yeah, I'm buying them having more losses than wins. I think they will be like less than 500.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I agree with that. We all like Mike Leach came in, hair on fire, 60 attempts, beats LSU, and it was awesome. It was a great arrival, and it was fun, and it's fun to have him in the SEC. And we all assumed, okay, let's see how this works as people start to adjust. And people adjusted week 2, and they already got that L. And so I'm interested in. I do think they're probably about a 4-6 team now, and it'll be an entertaining next 8 games because who the hell knows?
Sort of as a corollary to your point, I think we all thought they were going to be 1-1 at this point of the year.
That's true. Yeah.
Just the way it went down is,
right.
Luckily for Mississippi State, they do get Vanderbilt this year, which is like if you're one of those West teams that gets them, that's a gift. And they also get Missouri from the East. So, I I feel like they're going to be favored in both those, probably. But we'll see. Anything can happen. 2020 is a weird year, man. All right, where are we going now?
All right, so the Ole Miss Kentucky game. The price on Ole Miss is they will average 35 points. They will give up 35 points a game. So their average score and their average points allowed will be 35 plus throughout the year. And they will be the most exciting 500 team ever.
I wrote this, but I'm buying. Like, this is like Big 12 football coming to the SEC. Ole Miss's defense is horrendous. They allowed 400 on the ground to Kentucky. Kentucky had 3 different 100-yard rushers. Kentucky, if they hadn't kind of messed around at the goal line there earlier in the game, they probably win it. Matt Corral, you don't see that few balls hit the ground in a walkthrough. And they're so much fun to watch because they're going to give up 1 million points, and the way Kentucky played them was very interesting. Like they allowed hardly any explosive passes, like as far as like the bombs. Like Florida gave up some bombs to him, and Matt Corral was very patient. Surprising to me a little bit actually that he'd be that patient and hit the underneath stuff.
And props to Kiffin, like he's got Corral playing good, and Corral's talented, but I think there's a reason John Rice Plumlee was playing over him last year. And it wasn't just that he's an athletic quarterback in a Rich Rodriguez system. I think it was that Matt Corral would do some things that would be pretty frustrating for coaches. And Kiffin's got him taking care of the ball. He's got him making good decisions. He's got him just flat out playing good football.
If you saw Corral play in high school, he has that YOLO Brett Favre hero ball complex about him. And I think that's what Kentucky was banking on, that, hey, we'll play off. He'll throw us a couple picks. And he just didn't. He was just accurate underneath, hit guys in stride, and make Kentucky make tackles. And Kentucky's defense so far this year it's not terrible, but it's not quite what I thought it was going to be. So they got a little room for improvement there. And yet Ole Miss's schedule, Barton, is not super friendly. I think I have them going 5-5, and I definitely think they're going to keep allowing 35 plus, and they're going to score 35 plus in a lot of their games. So, yeah, go ahead and give me a buy here.
Yeah, I just want to be on the side of Ole Miss. They're just, it's almost like when you buy a stock just because you want to say you own it. I don't know if you're like a big Jack Daniels drinker or something, like you'll buy some stock in Jack Daniels.
There you go.
Or you just I just want Ole Miss is just going to be a fun team this year, and maybe a fun team moving forward. And they're getting exactly what they bargained for in Lane Kiffin, to the extreme. And so, yeah, I'm with you there. The price on Kentucky is Kentucky will be the best 3-7 team in America. So basically, the price there is this is just a team that's not going to get a bunch of wins this year.
Yeah, I think they're going to be a solid team. But Barton, here's the rest of their schedule: Mississippi State this weekend, at Tennessee, Georgia, at Missouri, host Vandy, at Alabama, at Florida, South Carolina. They're favored against Mississippi State. I think they're favored at Missouri. Not by a lot. They're favored at home against Vandy. They might be favored at home against South Carolina. Probably. I don't know. Maybe they can get to 4, but this is. I think I'll buy.
It's daunting. So all right. They're 0-2. Let's just say 0-3 with Alabama, 0-4 with Georgia, 0-5 with Florida. Maybe they get one of those SEC East teams. I can't see this team
They're
getting
at Tennessee.
Bama. So they're 0-5. So they got to go 3-2 with the other ones, being Mississippi State, Tennessee, Missouri, Vanderbilt, South Carolina.
Yeah.
I think they can get to 3. When you wrote this out, I thought it would be an easy, like, give me the over on Kentucky, but it is tough to come by. Like, they missed 2 opportunities here early in the year. But I'm gonna buy, like, you're buying the statement. I'm buying Kentucky. Like, I'm buying that Kentucky will outperform that. So I say they figure out a way to get to 4. I've just
Okay.
I've just been.
I like it.
I've been on the Kentucky train a little bit, and I don't feel like it's time to get off. I think that now, as I say that, and we haven't gotten to our Auburn discussion yet, but you could look at that first week against Auburn and say, competitive game. Kentucky really kind of executed the way they wanted to. Score doesn't represent how close it was. They got jobbed at the end of the first half, where they should have taken the lead into halftime, like, yada, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, like, Auburn might not be that good. And Kentucky wasn't able to beat Auburn. And Ole Miss is, even if Ole Miss is a good version of Ole Miss, no one believes Ole Miss is, like, somehow like one of the top teams in the West. So I don't know, man. The reality is, like, we got to recalibrate the way we think about a record in this conference-only SEC. So I say 4-6 because I just kind of want to be bullish on Kentucky, but I don't know how much I really believe that. I'm having a hard time convincing myself of that as we talk through it. But
it's tough.
It boils down to this week. Like, if they lose to Mississippi State, then forget about it.
Yeah, and I mean, who knows what their mentality is like if they go to 0-3, So,
yep.
All right, Missouri 12, Tennessee 35. This is I wrote, and you wrote on this game as well. This just kind of felt like 1998, and Tennessee is just bullying people at the line of scrimmage, particularly with their offensive line against Missouri's defensive line.
Just throwing out 98, just throwing out 1998 in there.
That's like half the usernames on GoVols 24/7. It's like feels like 98, apostrophe 98. So they weren't super explosive, but they were extremely, like, in control of the game. I felt like from start to finish, they were almost negative, like almost never in bad down and distance situations. So I set an aggressive one here. You watched a good part of this game. So your buy or sell for Tennessee is they can finish tied for second in the East or better.
So I noticed you say tied, and I think that's probably a key distinction there, because I don't think they're ready to win the East, but I can get on board with tied. Like, I think that's the or better part. I'm probably not there yet. I'm sort of on board with the idea if the statement were Tennessee can finish as high as tied for second in the East.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You don't think they're gonna finish higher than second, but at least a tie for second.
Right. I think the offensive line is the offensive line. Jeremy Pruitt, like, when Phil Fulmer offered him the job and he accepted it, and he looked at Tennessee's roster and he laid down in bed that night. He probably slept an hour and a half, and the thing that was keeping him up was envisioning an offensive line and envisioning how he wanted a little bit of a ragtag, lightweight, not super powerful offensive line that he inherited, and how he wanted that group to look. I think he thought about this. like what he has now. I think they've effectively built that. I think that they've effectively added the speed they didn't have last year and the year before that on the perimeter on offense. I think that they've effectively recruited a couple of monsters on defense. And I think that they are a team that is like they're football players. And I say that in the sort of cliche uh, vernacular of just he's a football guy. I get the sense that these guys like football for the right reasons. They play it as if they like it for the right reasons. They play it. They seem like they like the competition, not the the turnover chain or whatever whatever sort of you have to do to get people fired up. And I just think that they're going to be really good, and I think that they're going to get somebody. I think they're going to beat. I think that they will beat either Georgia, Florida, or Alabama. I don't know. I don't think they're going to beat all of them. I don't think they're going to beat two of them. I think they're going to beat one of them.
VOD. In my head, I was like, all right, note to self.
I mean, I don't know.
There we go.
Like I said, and they may get housed by Alabama and they may get housed by Florida and but I just think they're good enough to beat one of them this year. And I could be wrong because we're judging them on a South Carolina team that we're still figuring out and a Missouri team we're still figuring out. But I think they handled those two teams like men. Like they handled those two teams like they knew what they were doing. And now this week is the first real test. They got Georgia this week, right?
They do.
So, yeah.
All right, I'm gonna do the party pooper here. I'm gonna sell.
You out, huh?
Right now I think they're like 6-4, but I can get them to 7-3. If I'm optimistic, I'm like, all right, they can go 7-3. Even if they win one of Georgia, Florida, Bama, they still have Kentucky, A&M, and at Auburn. And I have a hard time thinking that they're going to be able to be in a tie for second in the East or better, because even if they clip one of the big three they play, I just don't see them going 3-0 against Kentucky, A&M, and at Auburn. So for me, that's tough. I can see 7-3. I think you might have to go 8-2 to finish tied for second in the East this year. Now, if 7-3 gets you a tie, then I'll be wrong and Barton will be right, assuming Tennessee can actually go 7-3. I just don't trust Garantano enough yet. And there will be some teams on this schedule that will be able to neutralize that offensive line enough to make Garantano put the game on his shoulders. And I don't know that I trust him enough yet. And I think one of those teams might be this weekend.
Yeah. I to be clear, if I'm predicting the order of finish in the SEC East, I'm not predicting Tennessee to finish second. I'm predicting them to finish third. Like, I don't think that they get – I guess the way I read it is – I don't know how I read it. I guess what I'm saying is I think that they're capable of finishing tied for second. But I do think that there's a realistic scenario where they win one of the big three. And yet I'm also not ruling out that then they would lose to someone else to sort of backfill that win, whether it is to Kentucky or Auburn or whoever. But this is a fascinating team. And I think that and what I wrote about it this weekend is I think that they have arrived in a very clear tier that's important to position themselves in. That tier being consistently winning, consistently looking competent, consistently beating the teams that they're supposed to beat. Now we find out if they can get into the other tier.
I think that's really fair. I have a buy or sell here, which you actually wrote. Missouri will finish better than 6th in the East. Obviously, I think we're going to put Vanderbilt probably in 7th in the East. So this comes down to really Kentucky and South Carolina?
I think so, yeah.
Am I wrong that I can't judge Missouri yet? Like they
No,
were
I
out
think that's what makes this is a tricky question.
like Bama, they were so outclassed. Tennessee, they were specifically outclassed up front, and Tennessee Tennessee started just kind of trying to salt the game away after like the opening kick of the second half. I was looking through it, I was like, man, they weren't really trying to push the ball at all after this point. And I do think if Tennessee stepped on the gas more, they could have blown them out more. If they really wanted to try, but I don't think Tennessee really wanted to. So this is the first one where it's not like I don't just not. It's not just a tough call. I have no opinion on this. I don't know enough about them yet at all, really. But I'll go ahead and say, just comparing results, South Carolina was much tougher against Tennessee than Missouri was. So I'm going to go ahead and sell. I do not think they will be better than 6. I think they're going to be just only above Vandy.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. And if they finish better than that, I think that's a really good sign for what's to come under Eli Drinkwitz. Because I just think I just think Kentucky is good. I think South Carolina is good. We just talked about Tennessee. I just think if you're going to be finishing above those teams, like you've earned that. That's not, you don't back into that. Maybe we'll be proven wrong on that because South Carolina is 0-2, Kentucky's 0-2, but I think I saw some things I liked out of South Carolina, and I continue to think Kentucky has some good pieces. So, no, I'm with you. I think this is a year to get their feet under them in the SEC, and then we'll see what happens after that.
All right, Barton, we are almost at 600 reviews on Barton and Bud, which is pretty awesome because I think we're actually going to get there before we get to 40 episodes. So very excited about that. Obviously, you guys can help us out. Give us those 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. If you're listening to this on a website, like maybe 247sports.com, be sure to actually hit that subscribe button on the player. Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, probably soon to be on Amazon. So whatever you like, go ahead and mash the subscribe button. We'll be right back with you after this quick ad break. All right, man, we're going to head down to the swamp here. Florida 38, South Carolina 24, in a score that I kind of feel like wasn't really indicative of how in control of the game that Florida was for the most part. Like UF pretty much drove and scored at will until it decided that the game was basically out of reach. And then South Carolina went on 3 ridiculously slow, 17 play, 51-yard drive. That Florida was like, oh man, no, please don't go on a drive of 50 yards. It takes 20 play. No, guys, don't do that to us 3 times. It was, I don't know. I was watching on Twitter and South Carolina fans were like, man, we're moving the ball. I'm like,
yeah,
we're watching. Yeah,
hey,
that's true.
I was loving it because I was sitting there. I was loving it because I was on South Carolina plus 17.5. And so, hey, if you're going to methodically drive down the field, eat up clock and cut into that lead, that's fine with me. Let's get this game over with and get you inside the number, and then let's get the heck out of here.
I had Florida under 37.5.
Ooh.
Yeah. It was that kind of weekend too.
Man, feel for you there.
I was thinking, I was like, all right, either I bet South Carolina or I bet Florida under its total. I have some belief in South Carolina's defense because I think their secondary is pretty good overall. And then their safeties ended up playing terribly. And UF has like dudes that I've barely recall as recruits just bombing on them in the secondary, and Trask, is looking like Joe Burrow and all other stuff. So here's your buy or sell for UF. They're the favorite in the East.
So I'm selling this, not because I don't think that they can win the East. I thought they could win the East before the season. I didn't think that they would win the East. I picked Georgia to win the East. I certainly thought they could, and I think that they are better than I anticipated. So like I'm not selling on like this being like a badass team, this being a legit team. But I am sort of tapping the brakes. Like I'm seeing a lot of like, is this the 2019 LSU like team comparisons?
Oh,
And I maybe not a lot. I've seen it a few times, like more than once, more than twice. And I'm just not, I guess I'm just sort of pushing back on the idea that this is a dominant juggernaut of that ilk. And I think I still have a little bit more confidence in Georgia because I think I don't know, maybe it's just I know what Georgia is. Like Georgia just is what they were last year. Like they're the same Georgia team that we're used to seeing. So I've got comfort in understanding what I'm seeing. I'm not sure I've got a firm grasp on what I'm seeing from Florida yet. I think their offense is awesome. I'll tell you what, if you want to make a comparison that I'm willing to sort of that I think is more reasonable than this could be 2019 LSU, I think specifically Kyle Trask could be 2019 Joe Burrow. Like he's making, to me, pretty significant strides from 2019 to 2020. Like he looks to me like a different quarterback. And that's not to say like Joe Burrow's that was best season of all time. But I'm just saying like that's a guy. Last year was his first year playing. He's second, like this is his second year with Dan Mullen and Brian Johnson, and you're seeing it. And so I believe in all that, but I think the defense has given enough indication through 2 weeks that we're not really sure what we've got there. I think the offense is. I mean, what if Kyle Pitts gets COVID? You know, like what's they are. He's a big part of it, and I'm not going to act like he's a one-man show. I mean, Kadarius Toney was awesome. They're finding playmakers at wide receiver that are stepping up beyond those guys. I think the run game is still a little bit of a, I'm not sure exactly what we've got in the run game there, but they're certainly capable. I'm not there yet. Are you there yet?
I have I have 9 buy or sells for you, or actually 10. Real quick, rapid fire. Buy or sell. Jacob Copeland starts for 2019 LSU.
Sell.
Buy or sell. Kyle Pitts starts for 2019 LSU.
Buy.
Okay. Kadarius Toney.
Sell.
Trevon Grimes.
Sell.
Malik Davis.
Sell.
Kyle Trask.
Sell.
All 5 of the offensive linemen.
Like trade those 5 for the LSU 5, you're saying?
Sure. Or like individually, I think you got at least 4 sells here.
Yeah.
So, like, I see the stylistic comparisons, but this Florida offense does not have anywhere near the level of elite talent that LSU offense had. I mean, like Justin Jefferson, who was oftentimes overlooked last year for 2019 LSU, just put up his second consecutive 100-plus yard game as a rookie today in the NFL. Like, this Dan Mullen's a hell of an offensive coach, but I think our
Clyde
point's
Edwards-Helaire is going to be the rookie of the year.
Yeah, exactly.
And Jamar Chase is going to be the first receiver taken. And
right.
And Joe Burrow is looking like a stud. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, got his first win today, I think, over Jacksonville.
Did he?
So.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's I'm going to go ahead and sell slightly, but Florida is better than I thought they were going to be because Trask seems to have taken that next step, at least through 2 games against 2 defenses, which one is probably horrific and the other one is I don't think it's bad, but South Carolina's defense may not be quite as good as I thought it was going to be. I mean, Tennessee also.
Yeah, that's a disappointing unit so far. Not that I thought they were going to be like some, but I mean that's Will Muschamp's. Well, we'll get to South Carolina. All right, South Carolina.
I'm also not quite as down on UF's defense, by the way. I'm not.
Yeah, I will say, like, I was in real time sort of as I was watching that game, especially early. I think it was the first half when I was sort of having these sentiments where I was thinking, man, as good as this offense is, South Carolina's moving the ball. And then I looked up at the end of the day, and I think that those moments were much more fleeting than I remember, because they had a pretty good day from a number standpoint. They had a pretty good day from, like the box score tells you that maybe it wasn't quite as forgiving of a unit as maybe my eyes were telling me it was.
All right, quickly to South Carolina here. Gamecocks can still find 3 wins.
So I gotta pull up their schedule here. My hunch is no, as I think about it. But okay, so they got Vanderbilt, so let's just say that's one.
Okay.
Auburn, LSU, A&M. So they got to get 3 out of. You know what?
They host Missouri.
This is a pretty friendly schedule, because you still have, like, a lot of your winnable games are still left. Like, I think Florida and Tennessee are probably 2 of the better teams in their schedule. I think the Florida Tennessee stretch is probably a better stretch than, say, like that's a tougher 2-game sequence than Auburn, LSU, LSU, A&M, A&M, Ole Miss. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
I think that's it. So I'm gonna buy that they can get to 3.
I'm going to buy as well. I think A&M at home is maybe sneaky more than people realize, especially like this A&M team might have a high quit factor, like on the season. They
With you.
After this blowout loss, we already saw a couple of their guys opt out. They had a lot of offseason turmoil. Like, this was supposed to be the year. Things are kind of coming crashing down around them. I could see a little bit of a quit factor there. So I'm going to go ahead and buy South Carolina can still find 3 wins as well there. All right, LSU 41, Vanderbilt 7. We have another one to get to, so I'm going to make this fairly quick on Vandy. Vandy will go winless and will score less than 100 points. So they will average less than 10 points a game in SEC play.
Yeah, I agree. I think Vanderbilt, that like last week, if Vanderbilt was a stock, you short Vanderbilt last week, because they were competitive against A&M, but like if you really looked at it, like that was they had no business being in that game, and they had no business being in the LSU game, and they're going to be. I just think it's going to get tougher and tougher, and the season's going to pile up on them, and so I don't mean to pile on and pick on Vanderbilt. I just think this is still as much moxie as Ken Seals looks like he has as a true freshman. He's got a tough road in front of him.
And Barton, he really does not look like he has SEC level players around him. Like, they're like the
That's
one
the
team in the SEC. They don't look like they belong at all.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
They got pretty good defensive line, but they just man. Like that's not a group that can get open, create separation. Like they got a few single players out there here and there.
All right, you created this one. LSU, buy or sell, will find a way to finish second in the West.
So I'll take the lead here.
Okay.
The thing with LSU that's interesting is I think the West is not as good as we expected. I mean, part of it is LSU's not as good as maybe some people expected, but think about it. Like, to get to second in the West, you just have to assume Mississippi State sort of takes care of itself and loses a few more games, and you can be ahead of Mississippi. Like that head-to-head doesn't come into play. And then the team you're gonna obviously let's remove Alabama from the equation. So then, can you finish above Auburn, Arkansas, A&M, Ole Miss? Like, which one of those teams looks like they're better than LSU? It's a much more attainable situation than I considered after week 1. I would buy it. I actually would buy it. I don't really think LSU is that good. But I just don't think the SEC West is as good as it has been.
Man, getting Vanderbilt is such a big deal in this. Like who you draw from the East matters an awful lot. I'm going to sell this.
So who would you sell it in favor of who? Like who would you think is more likely to finish second?
I so against the aggregate certainly, but also just on an individual team.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I kind of think Auburn, which I know is out there, and we're going to talk about Auburn in probably about 30 seconds. But
It's not out there, yeah.
like I still kind of believe in Auburn. Bo Nix has shown me some stuff. LSU has a lot of young players playing, and I don't think that they're immune from like the bad upset loss like we saw against Mississippi State, because that young talent they have is super talented, and they're gonna have some blowout wins, but they're also gonna have some days where somebody throws them a look they haven't seen. They also haven't learned how to be professional, for lack of a better term, a lot of these young guys, and bring it every single week. Like that's a learning process, and I don't know that these guys are going to be able to do that. So I guess I'll go ahead and sell. I don't feel great about the sell, obviously, and talent wise, they are the second most talented team in the West. I think. Hell, I don't even know that anybody, by the way, finishes within 2 games of Bama in the West.
So
Like
I actually
7-3 probably wins the West,
I have
or the second.
written down on my notepad. I'm selling this, and as my preamble there, I just sort of talked myself into it because But here's the thing, like we could just sort of roll right into the Auburn discussion too. So the Auburn, what's the Auburn? What do we have the Auburn line at? We're saying Auburn will bounce back and go 7-3 is what we got the Auburn deal set at. So this is what's tricky for me is after week 1 against Kentucky, I didn't necessarily like what I saw on the field, but I felt like Auburn, with some good young running backs, we saw Tank Bigsby flash this past weekend, with a offense that's still kind of learning and developing under Chad Morris, with a defensive line that's not as experienced as last year, but will gain meaningful reps and get better and better. That I last week I was like, you know what? Despite any issues I had, and I had several with what I saw on the field, I feel good about the in-season development that we're going to see out of this team. And so I think I need to remind myself that that's what I was thinking last weekend, instead of trying to like recalibrate Auburn based on watching Georgia dismantle them. Because I think probably Georgia's just really good. Like we talked about Georgia's, this could be a historically good defense. And so to then sort of turn around and be like, and get down on Auburn because of last weekend, I think is like, you got to either decide that Georgia isn't as good as we thought they were, or that they are. And I'm going to say Georgia is as good as we thought they were. And so I'm not going to downgrade Auburn as much as I'm tempted to. And I'm going to go back to, like I'll sell LSU, I'll buy Auburn, and I'll say, you kind of talk me back into Auburn and the idea that they are going to continue to improve, and that this weekend is not a good representation of who they're going to be by the end of the year.
Barton, I thought it was a freaking miracle that Auburn got to 216 yards against Georgia. Like, Bo Nix was scrambling for his life a lot, and they only sacked him, 2 or 3 times, I think it was. And like, it's not like Auburn has a super complicated passing game where they're scheming, their guys open on every play, but they do have some good speed on the outside with Shorts, and I trust Williams. I really kind of liked what I saw from Bo Nix last night. Like, he was trying to make it work, and yet wasn't turning the ball over a whole lot either. So, like, under extreme duress, and he was against the defense. I'll cite my friend Bill Connolly here. Best defensive SP plus last 30 years. 2006 Virginia Tech, 1991 Miami, 2017 and 2011 Bama, and then UGA would be right in front of 2011 Bama.
That's based on the preseason, or like based on the first 2 weeks?
It's based on like preseason plus the first 2 weeks.
Okay.
Like projection plus the first 2 weeks. Yeah, but if it holds, they would be the fourth best defense of the last 30 years in college football. Like, that's the thing. Auburn only scored 6 points, only had 216 yards. But remember when we did that kind of silly graphic about how many points are you going to need? I'm trying to – I don't remember where we put that thing, but I'm pretty sure we're 2-0 right now.
Oh, yeah, I think so. I mean, and for Auburn, I feel like Auburn, the number was like 13 or something. So
unless we said something silly like 3 for Arkansas or something like that.
Which might have. I think I might have said like 7.
Okay.
But I think you might have gone low on Arkansas. But either way, they're in pretty good shape. And I think it's important to remind ourselves about that. Like, whenever someone lays an egg against Georgia and you start convincing yourself that they suck and their offense is pitiful, like, it's important to remember what they're going up against. This defense it could be that good. And so I don't love Auburn, but I trust that team, especially that team, to figure things out in a way that I'm not sure the other teams in the SEC West have proven that they can. Because this is not last year's LSU team, and that would be the one that would probably be the contender.
Do you trust Gus more than the two guys in that division who have natties, in Coach O and Jimbo?
I think I do. I mean, I definitely trust him more than Jimbo, and I think, yeah, I do.
I think I do too. My concerns about Auburn, and I am buying this as well. I'm a little bit concerned about Auburn's run game here, right? Like, they also really didn't run the ball all that well against Kentucky. They didn't run the ball at all against Georgia. And I'm concerned about them missing guys like Derek Brown and those dudes up front. Like, they got pushed around last night by Georgia's offensive line, which is really not something that I thought was going to happen in this game. I had Auburn and I had the under. And, like, Auburn's defense held Georgia to 27 points. That's true. But Georgia, I'm not really sure, was trying to score 30 points after a certain point in time. They were just kind of, like, trying to win the game and doing that in the most effective way when they realized that Auburn was not going to be able to move the ball. Let's go ahead and go here to Georgia. I have dogs are a playoff team. Like, Georgia is going to the playoff.
I'm selling this because, and I actually predicted them to go to the playoffs before the season when we had to fill. I can't remember who I had to fill it out for. Maybe it was for 24/7. And I kind of regret picking Georgia, not because I don't think that they're good enough, not because I don't think that they are one of the top 4 teams in the country. I have what's going to happen, I think, is they're going to play. Obviously, they're going to play Alabama in the regular season, and they're going to play them in the championship game if they win the East. And so, I don't think that a Georgia that's lost to Alabama twice is getting into the playoffs. And I'm not so sure that, like, a 1 I guess that's where I'm at. I still think Alabama is better than them, and I think if you lose to Bama twice, that's probably going to keep you out of the playoffs.
To me, it kind of depends on the losses. I'm going to go ahead and buy this, though. I had that kind of faith in that defense. I was impressed by a lot of the things Georgia did. First of all, I want to give Stetson Bennett the fourth some praise here, because I did not think he was all that impressive against Arkansas, and I was not persuaded by some of the arguments Georgia fans were making. But Auburn's defense is a lot better than Arkansas's defense, and, like, he escaped the pocket well. He threw on the run well. He showed off the mobility. For the most part, he threw in time. He threw the one ball that probably should have been picked, but, like, it wasn't, and it's fine. And, like, he is good enough for them to win most of their games pretty comfortably, I think. Additionally, he didn't just lock on to George Pickens. Like, Auburn was trying to take away Pickens for the most part, and so he found this dude named Kyrus Jackson, who I saw a couple times play 7-on-7 and, once a high school game and whatnot. And, decently rated recruit. Not a 5-star, but like one of these million 4-stars that Georgia signs, I'm pretty sure. And he balled out. So, like, if he can be their number 2 and really step up as a number 2, that was one of the questions that the guys, over at Dogs 24/7 had about this team in the offseason. Like, who would step up and be the real number 2 for this team? I also think that it gets lost here, but they changed who was playing on the offensive line in the second half of that Arkansas game. And since that point, they've kind of just mauled people, right? Like they pushed Arkansas around a little bit up front in the second half of that game. They pushed Auburn around really from about the 5-minute mark of the first quarter on in this game. And like, if that's what they're going to be, then that's fine. Like maybe they'll run their new offense fully. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll just push people around. Zamir White looked pretty good, like not crazy explosive, but pushing the pile. They're playing bully ball, and there's not a lot of teams out there that I think can stop them from playing, bully ball. Also, I didn't see this. Did you see Stetson Bennett like get a fat lip?
I heard. I did not
when
see
they pulled him.
I did not see it. I saw that. I saw someone tweeting about it.
I'm giving Georgia bonus points for this. That is like peak Georgia. Stetson Bennett the fourth, which is like the ultimate Georgia quarterback name, and then he does that, and he can run. Like, dude, this might be a sign.
Kind of a country club name, but he's a good old boy in his habits. One of the guys sticking a big chaw in. That's my quarterback right there.
We're gonna have these Georgia fans on Instagram like, get you a QB that can do both, right? I think that's, yeah, dude. If this defense keeps playing this well, and we're going to see this weekend, I suspect that they are going to probably not allow Tennessee to run the ball a whole lot on them and see if they can put it on Garantano and see how well that goes. But how many points do they need to beat Tennessee? If they score 27, I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah. If they score 27, they win. I think that this is probably another game where they probably – I think if they get to 24, I feel pretty good about winning. They probably can win it with 20. So we'll see.
It's going to be awesome. We're going to go ahead and cut it off here because we are at like an hour and 10 minutes. Really appreciate y'all listening again, guys. 5 stars on Apple Podcasts really helps us. Getting to 600 before 40 episodes is pretty remarkable, and it's all thanks to you, the listener. So if y'all like the conversation, we try to keep it interesting. And I know on the show we record Sunday night, drop Monday morning, it can't just be a recap show. So hat tip to Barton for sure for coming up with this game. I like the buy or sell stuff, so we should do this. Maybe make it a regular feature somehow. So cool, man. I'll see you on Wednesday.
See you Wednesday.